Hull work, sonar dome, 40 millimeters. We're going to cover all this in dry dock update number 3. But first, remember, share this video with somebody that you think would like it. Hit the like button, subscribe, and don't forget to donate. So, what have we been doing in the shipyard lately? First thing we've been doing is blasting everything up on above the main deck and above. All the superstructure is being blasted, and they've started at the bow and they're working aft. So you've got gun mount number 1, 51, is completely blasted now. They've done all the forward deck house, and they are working up on the 01 level. They've got most of that blasted going back to midships. The main deck is blasted going back as far as the breakwater. On the 02 level, which is the bridge level, they have got the entire bridge level blasted, and they've even gone up on the flying bridge level, the 03 level, and they have blasted the railings and the deck. They blasted the Mark 37 gun director and even got atop it, blasted the radar arrays on there, and they've worked their way up the mast to about a few feet below the yard arm. Back behind that section of the superstructure, they have now got the forward smokestack and the searchlight platform cleaned off. And as you look at the video and the images from the dry dock, you'll see steel versus aluminum. The aluminum is nice and clean and silvery and everything, not a bit of rust on it. The steel looks rusty. If you are not familiar with this process, don't panic, don't send us nasty messages, because this is not rust.
This is not pudding.
Per se, eating into the steel that they've uncovered. It was fine, it was painted. This is what you call flash rust, and it appears sometimes minutes, sometimes hours in a high humidity environment like South Louisiana. Somebody emailed recently and was talking about the flash rust, and they said it appears minutes in my location. So this is just stuff right on the surface. They will clean that off when they come back to apply all the coatings, the primers and the paints. So that's where we are with blasting. I don't have a good memory, even though I'm a historian, so I'm using my crib notes. Next up, we have touch points on the hull. We are finally getting to the touch points. The hull was blasted back in August and September, and now they have determined the hull thicknesses, and they are now proceeding to work on the touch points. For those that haven't tuned in before this is your first time. KIDD rises and falls in the Mississippi River with the spring floods, 40-foot difference each year maximum, and she sits down in the low season into a cradle, which sits there just like a dry dock, except it's concrete, so we can't move it like you do in a dry dock, which is why we had to leave and go to Houma. So these touch points where she impacts the cradle, it's a concrete cradle with rubber neoprene pads on top at the touch points. After 40 years, those touch points have gotten pretty thin, and the last time they actually got handled in a dry dock was in 1962 by the Navy. And of course, you move those dry dock blocks out of the way, you can work on the part where it was touching, and then you slide it back into place after the paint is dry. Well, we can't do that with our cradle, so we haven't been able to do it since we got KIDD. Now, in the shipyard, they're moving the blocks away, and they're working on those touch points. And the way they're fixing these touch points is the metal is thinned out enough to where they are cropping and renewing, so that they're coming out away from the thin metal till they get to good thickness, and then they're cutting that section out, pulling it out, and then they are putting new metal in. Now, the good thing about this is the new metal is going to be thicker than the original thickness of the surrounding hull. And before they put that new metal in, they are putting extra structural support in behind that new metal, and then welding the new metal on top of it. And we're going to go into this in more detail with all the hull work in a different video coming out of the pipeline soon. So stay tuned for that. After the touch points, you'll notice we cut off the sonar dome. The interesting thing about the sonar dome is this is a Cold War sonar dome. If you've been watching, you've heard us talking about the Cold War rudder versus the World War II rudder. Well, there was also a change in 1951 with the World War II sonar dome disappearing and a Cold War sonar being put on. And if you tune into Buffalo Naval Park, Shane Stevenson has talked about this in recent months. The World War II sonar dome was farther forward on KIDD, and we should be showing some diagrams right now, and you'll see that it was smaller and more cylindrical, and it was located about a little bit forward, if you're looking at the ship from the side, just forward of Mount 51. And then when they cut that off and moved it, it moved away from the underwater sound room where all that equipment was, and it moved all the way back aft under Mount 52. And that's directly underneath the enlisted mess deck and the reefer deck. In fact, when we go down the reefer, if you go to our Don't Fear the Reefer video, you'll see Miss Molly coming down the ladder with the camera, and there is a small oval hatch at the base of the ladder in the reefer deck. That leads straight to where all the cables come up through the hull, through the pass-throughs in the hull, from the sonar dome, the Cold War sonar dome. So we have cut that off, and that's going to give us more clearance moving forward, coming back home and getting into the cradle. We won't have to thread the needle quite as much. I'm sorry, I'm being distracted by booming on top of our roof. We're having our roof replaced. But we don't have to worry about threading that needle with that sonar dome, and it's not right for our configuration anyway. For the future, we are tossing the idea around of possibly fabricating a World War II era design sonar dome, putting it into place, but it'll be a bolt-on to where when the river drops, we can get out, and if we've got to move the ship, we can unbolt it, slide it out, and move it. Unfortunately, the way the cradle was designed, it will not be able to go in the original World War II location because there's concrete there and pads holding the ship up. So we wouldn't be able to put it there. It wouldn't be 100% accurate, but it would have the appearance of a World War II dome. Next up, we had some very special guests in late November and early December. First off the bat, Battleship Missouri visited us in the form of curator Franklin Clay. Franklin came over. They were actually visiting North Louisiana, Lake Providence, to interview one of their last surviving World War II crew members from the Mighty Mo. And they scheduled their trip so that they could make a lightning trip down to New Orleans, take a quick 1 or 2 hour visit over to Houma, and then head back to New Orleans to hop on their plane and get back to Hawaii. So it was great to see Franklin again. And I believe he said this is his first time to see a dry docking because he got there to Missouri just after they dry docked back in 2012, right after the movie Battleship, for which KIDD was a stand-in. So look at Battleship and you'll see when Rihanna is with all the old guys in fire control, that's actually KIDD's fire control substituting for the Mighty Mo. Late November, Ryan Szymanski and Libby Jones came down and they visited us in Drydock, and we did a series of 3 collaborative videos. Part 1 was airing on New Jersey, Part 2 was airing on the KIDD's channel. So if you're interested in that, we were talking about everything from electrolysis to the rudder, everybody loves the rudder, to target dates for restoration. And now we have a train.
I think we found the train.
So we've got a plane in the background, a train, and there's a bunch of automobiles on the street. So we live with this every day. This train passes by us about 5 times a day. It's an active rail line, a freight rail line. And the engines inside this train engine, the generators inside this train engine, are about the same size, well, actually a little larger than what we had on the ship going down to Houma. We would probably have a generator about the size of one of these large semis going down the river. But this is what we live with every single day of the year. Yeah. I prefer ships. So, anyway, Ryan and Libby came down, we did those collaborative videos, and then for the week of December 7th, our last group of special guests, we had 8 crew members from our successor, USS KIDD, DDG 100. They came over. They try to make it on an annual basis when deployments allow. They came over for Pearl Harbor Day to join with us in that ceremony and to let their sailors see the original ship with their ship's name and continue that legacy of Rear Admiral Kidd. They participated in our Pearl Harbor Day ceremony right here where I'm standing on the 2nd floor of the museum. And then we made a quick dash down to Houma, and Commander Kevin Pilcher, I hope I pronounced that right, Commander Pilcher had the great distinct pleasure of re-enlisting one of his crew members from the 100 on the bow of the 661. So that was a real distinct pleasure to have that happening on the 661. And it's not the first time. We actually had a gentleman, Barry Hardiman, from the USS KIDD DDG 993 back in 1997. And they came aboard while they were visiting for Mardi Gras. Cool story. Half the crew got to come up and visit and do a field day, clean up the ship a little bit, and then go back home instead of partying in the French Quarter. And they told them that they wanted to do it. And they talked about it so much that the other half of the crew that had to stay and man the ship that day, they got a day to go party in the quarter, and they demanded, we want to get a bus and we want to go to Baton Rouge too. So it's nice that the 3 kids have that sort of relationship, but Barry Hardiman re-enlisted in '97 on our enlisted mess deck. So it's a nice tradition continuing forward. Great to have the KIDD crew with us. The Don't Fear the Reefer video in our playlist, you saw Molly and Elijah and myself and Nathan, I think, was there. And we were pulling old equipment out of the reefer deck, out of the freezer and the refrigerators. Got corrected recently. It's not 3 freezers, it's 1 freezer and 2 refrigerators. So, but it's all the reefer. And we pulled all this old equipment out to clear the way because they needed access to the panels in the reefer to pull them off and get to the hull underneath for the hull work going on outside. Well, they have pulled those panels off. They have pulled all the insulation that was around the reefer out of there, and the shipyard reports, and I was able to lay eyes on it last week, the insulation was pristine. There was no deterioration. It wasn't even dirty. It was just beautiful white fiberglass insulation, and the hull immediately behind the insulation was pristine. No condensation in there whatsoever. Whoever made that install did the job and did it right. So they are taking care of those touch points around that area now, and they have verified that there is no deterioration on the inside of the hull. So when they finish the work on the touch points and put all that back together, weld it together, they're going to come back inside. They saved all that beautiful, really untouched insulation. They're going to put it back into place, put the panels back in place, and seal it all up just as if nobody ever opened it up. So that's what's going on with the reefer. And I'm happy to announce, after we've been talking about this since May or June, the sewage tank, the new sewage tank, we talked about it arriving. Well, it's in place. They cut a hole in the hull, they lifted it in, and they have the supports in place, and it is fully mounted. They have not connected the piping yet, but that'll come after they seal the hull back up and get all of the hull work done. That's a low priority deal. They can do it before we leave the yard. Their focus right now is getting everything blasted and getting the hull solid again. And like I said, we're going to do a video on that. And then last but not least, we got word from our friends at Battleship Texas. We got images. They have moved through their inventory of their stock, and they have brought 2 of our twin 40 millimeters in, Mount 41 and Mount 42, the ones on the forward part of the ship. And they have started disassembling them, tearing them apart down to their bare components so they can refurbish them, find out what's broken, what needs to be replaced, and put it all back together again. Now, our 40s for decades have elevated and have trained left and right, up and down. And they did that all the way up until the last couple of years when they started freezing up. Part of that was because of staffing cuts, maintenance cuts. Some of it was because of budget cuts, because of COVID, and some of it was because after COVID passed and we started rebounding a little bit, Nathan and I were really busy with the leaks in the hull, maintaining that and trying to make sure that the ship was in good condition and wouldn't get into trouble. So some of the other maintenance slid. Texas has had just fantastic work with their 40 millimeters, so they are working on ours. They're gonna get them cleaned up, they're gonna get them elevating and training again, and paint them up, and then they will ship them back to us and we will get them mounted back on the KIDD. So really exciting. And one interesting thing, a lot of folks have been asking where our 40s came from. All 4 of them, or all 5 of them rather, came from the Naval Ordnance Depot in Crane, Indiana. Some folks have asked, besides money and besides the legalities, why couldn't you get the 40s working? Well, some of them that came from Crane actually went underwater because there is a river near there. And in a flood, all of the stuff close to the river apparently went underwater, flooded. So it'll never work again. Even Texas can't work that sort of magic. But they did find, Travis sent me some pictures, a nice little ID tag on Mount 42. That's the one they've started with. They haven't got to 41 yet. And Mount 42, before it ended up in Crane, Indiana's Ordnance Depot, Mount 42 was mounted to the supply ship, USS Betelgeuse. So go look up Betelgeuse, you'll find her career and you'll see where that 40 millimeter came from. And the odds are very good, we haven't found out yet, but the odds are very good. If there's an ID tag on 41, it probably came from Betelgeuse as well. That's our dry dock update. Thank you for sticking with us. Remember, like, share, subscribe. Let folks that are out there that you know would enjoy this sort of material, let them know about us. And remember, we've got the money for the hull, but there's a lot of stuff that we want to do to make KIDD better than the bare minimum so that our successors don't have to worry about it when it becomes an emergency. So there's still a need for funding, still a need for donations. Go to USSKIDD.com and click that donate button. Thanks, and we'll see you next time.